Now the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today, as usual, although some of them are a little bit different than our usual fare, but they still fit in fairly well. We start with the good martini, as usual, and this is from a column on the dailybeast.com, not usually where we find our good martinis, but nonetheless, it's a column by Leslie Gelb, who's kind of a left-of-center establishment foreign policy type, and he's very, very tough on Obama's handling of foreign policy. In fact, here's his opening paragraph. Here's why America's failure to be represented at the Paris Unity March was so profoundly disturbing. It wasn't just because President Obama's or Vice President Biden's absence was a horrendous gaffe. More than this, it demonstrated beyond argument that the Obama team lacks the basic instincts and judgment necessary to conduct U.S. national security policy in the next 2 years. It's simply too dangerous to let Mr. Obama continue as is with his current team and his way of making decisions. America, its allies, and friends could be heading into one of the most dangerous periods since the height of the Cold War, and basically he advocates getting rid of most of Obama's top national security team, including John Kerry at the State Department, Susan Rice, the Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, and, of course, Valerie Jarrett. So most of that not likely to happen, Jim, but it's interesting that this seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back for even some who are inclined to support the president.
Yeah, this one jumps out for two reasons. One, who's saying it? I mean, Leslie Gelb, you may or may not have heard of him. You've probably seen him on C-SPAN. I don't mean to seem terribly critical of the guy, but he is like the foreign policy establishment of Washington, D.C. personified. Been with the Council of Foreign Relations for a really long time, Mr. Diplomacy, yada, yada, yada. And kind of the, you're not going to get a lot of crazy radical proposals out of him. This is the establishment, stay the course. And he's been, generally pretty positive on Obama. He was not a vociferous critic of the Bush administration. He kind of followed a lot of the establishment where it was a really good idea at the beginning, and then all of a sudden, this isn't working out the way I expected at all. No. But at one point, he has to explain and kind of justify to the readers of the Daily Beast that he's not having a foreign policy neurological breakdown. So when you're having to write to your readers, I'm not crazy, some might argue that that doesn't help your messaging because people who aren't crazy very rarely have to justify that they're not crazy. He just tears into Obama and the whole team around him. And he says, look, it's not just that they didn't go. This whole idea of, the staff didn't tell Obama. How is Obama not on top of this, right? How is, when this sort of thing happens, his instinct isn't to say, hey, I want to be there and stand with my colleagues, the French. Yes, Obama called him and stuff like that, but you can see it from Obama's remarks in the Oval Office. You can see it in this. This is not an issue that gets Obama jazzed. And what kind of makes this kind of significant, at one point in there, Gelb writes that, look, terrorism is the main issue of the era. I bet you if you surveyed the entire Obama foreign policy staff, maybe 5 to 10% would agree with that statement. I think a lot of them would say climate change. I think a lot of them would say, rising inequality, almost everything except terrorism they would say that, in part because it's wishful thinking. They want to believe that they're doing a great job. And to keep that belief, they have to downplay, ignore, or attack any evidence to the contrary. And the result of this is an administration that, means, look, they shot up a magazine. They killed a bunch of people. This stuff happens all the time. It's no big deal. And they treat it as no big deal. And everybody else can see that it's no big deal. And so really kind of the gist of the Gelb piece is that we're being governed by crazy people who don't really think terrorism is that important. And isn't that kind of what we've been saying from the beginning, Greg?
Pretty much.
We're not a Council of Foreign Relations. We're not a longtime New York Times foreign correspondent. There's something to be said to that. Sometimes you'd be so smart you ignore very obvious things.
I guess the lesson here is that the establishment takes 6 years to figure out what we can figure out in a few months.
Days, hours.
Maybe even, yeah. But anyway, on to the bad martini now, and this is also related to the Paris terrorist attack, and it's getting quite a bit of chatter today, but I'm not sure it should be getting as much shocked reaction as it is. But whenever Pope Francis speaks, for some reason, there's a lot of shock, and then there's always the explanation phase. This didn't seem to happen with previous popes, but it's happening now. This is the Associated Press version of the story. The Pope was on his way to the Philippines, and he was talking about how far people should be allowed to go to mock religion. And as the head of the Roman Catholic Church, he does think there's a limit there. He was referring to Alberto Gaspari in this quote, who organizes papal trips and was standing beside him on the papal plane. And the quote is, "If my good friend Dr. Gaspari says a curse word against my mother, he can expect a punch," Francis said, throwing a pretend punch his way. "It's normal. You cannot provoke. You cannot insult the faith of others. You cannot make fun of the faith of others." He went on to say that there was a limit to free speech when it concerned offending someone's religious beliefs, but said that it was an aberration to kill in the name of God, and religion can never be used to justify violence. So it might seem like he's looking in two different directions there. But Jim, as usual, people on the libertarian side of things shocked to find out that the Pope doesn't like blasphemy much.
Actually, I think the knowledgeable libertarians aren't surprised. Two aspects of his comments. One, the whole idea that if I say something about your mother, you're going to punch me. Some might say, didn't Jesus say something about turning another cheek and things like that? And so I don't know if the Pope is necessarily being prescriptive here, saying that if someone says something about your mother, you should punch them. I think he is kind of acknowledging the human nature that when you say something sufficiently provocative to someone, there's going to be a reaction, and that reaction, is going to be hostile, and it's just a question of just how hostile it'll get, and thus kind of trying to discourage, excessively provocative comments. I see two things coming out of this, and this is why it's kind of the bad martini, is that some people are going to say, well, first of all, this is Pope Francis endorsing censorship for the people who do want to censor comments about religion as offensive hate speech, and you should be able to put in jail and stuff like that. Maybe I'm reading him very differently or incorrectly. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Catholic doctrine. I just see kind of clarity here that the Pope's job is the Word of God. That is his ultimate authority, right and wrong. What is legal, what the government ought to do, those are kind of slightly different matters, unless you believe that everything that is immoral should be illegal and everything that is illegal should be immoral, and there can't be any differentiation there. Now, those of us in Western democracies kind of came along with this idea of, wait a second, not everything that's morally wrong needs to have the state intervening and watching out and investigating and punishing. That's ultimately God's work. God will judge us when all is said and done. And thus the government, since it's made up of very flawed human beings just like you and me, you don't want to put too much power in their hands doing that sort of stuff, because inevitably that power will get abused, things will go wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So I see him as saying, don't do this because it hurts other people's feelings. Don't do this because it is disrespectful to your fellow human beings. Even if they're of a different faith, they are God's creation, and it doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want to them. Some people may see this a little bit differently. And the other is, I think that there are some folks who really don't like this Pope and who really don't like the church as a whole. And anytime they can drive a wedge between Americans and our traditions and the Catholic Church, they'll do so. For obvious reasons, I very much want to push back against that, because these two traditions have coexisted pretty comfortably for more than 2 centuries here. Some bumps in the road inevitably, but I don't need my president and my Pope to always be on the same page and in absolute agreement. Turn the other cheek is a wonderful personal policy. It's a really lousy foreign policy. And I don't think either side is wrong for making the case that they are. We'll see how people react to this. My suspicion is that a lot of people who are looking to see a papal justification for the Hebdo attacks will claim this is a papal justification for the Hebdo attacks. And that's why I think it's a very bad martini.
All right. So much needed levity here. So let's move to the crazy martini now. And Jim, you remember the Michael Bloomberg days with the war against the sodas and salt and smoking, and then he moved towards the styrofoam ban, which it looks like de Blasio is now running with that because he doesn't have any other things to worry about in New York City. But now Bainbridge Island, Washington is going after cheese. But before you pick up the torches and pitchforks, let's just dig into this a little bit. They passed a resolution banning the consumption of cheese just tomorrow, Friday, January 16th. But here's why. Section 2 of the resolution. On Sunday, January 18th, 2015, the Seattle Seahawks opponent in the NFC Championship game will be the Green Bay Packers, a.k.a. Cheeseheads. Fans of the Green Bay Packers are frequently seen wearing obnoxious wedge-shaped foam hats painted yellow. Section 3. Due to the relationship between the Green Bay Packers, their fans, and cheese, the possession of and or consumption of cheese or cheese-flavored products shall be banned in Bainbridge Island City Hall on Friday, January 16th, 2015. The hammer has been dropped, Jim.
Remember when we were, complaining about the French, the bad old days, and we called them cheese-eating surrender monkeys?
Yes.
I was going to say the cheese was always the part we kind of, we kind of felt some sympathy for. An observation that like when I heard about this on Mike and Mike, and we've all seen lawmakers make funny bets. The mayor of one city bets another city and stuff like that.
Sure.
It would be easy to see when you first hear like, oh my God, here goes the nanny state again. It's only one day. It's only over City Hall, and there's really no word of what the punishment will be if you bring in cheese into the City Hall or something like that. Now, if you're a Green Bay Packer fan working for the Bainbridge Island city government, you could have a really tough day Friday. But you probably had some ribbing from your coworkers to begin with. So this is a pseudo nanny state moment that I'm going to let slide. I think it's hunky dory. They seem like they're just having fun out there. I got to visit Bainbridge Island on my trip out to Seattle, a very beautiful community just across the Puget Sound from the city. As long as there's no genuine retribution against somebody who's not marching in conformity of the Seattle Seahawks fans, as long as we don't have any fandom fascism, I'm fine with this. And, I kind of salute the city lawmakers for having a bit of sense of humor here.
And now, Jim, I'm just curious because you posted this on Campaign Spot, and after you posted the resolution, you say this: coming in a few weeks, a ban on New England clam chowder or Indiana sugar cream pies, because Indianapolis and New England are playing in the AFC Championship game. The implication being, Jim, that you think the Packers are going to lose. So have you heard from Packers fans on this?
I haven't heard much irateness. I don't think there are a lot of Packer fans who would say that it's ridiculous to think Seattle is going to win. They are the returning Super Bowl champs. They've been really hot lately. They're playing at home. The fans are unbelievably loud, et cetera, et cetera. The Green Bay Packers are underdogs for a good reason. I wouldn't be stunned by a Packers win. Packers are a good team too. But I'm really, really hoping that Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks beat New England, since I think New England is more likely to win on Sunday. And I can't watch. I can't. It would mean I'm no longer allowed to point out that Bill Belichick hasn't won the Super Bowl since Spygate. Way back when. So that little zinger that can always kind of deflate the New England Patriot fan is pretty important. So we'll see what happens. But God help you if you're a fan of the team besides the Seahawks on Bainbridge Island. That city government, it's a tough workplace.
Exactly.
Hostile workplace, you could say.
Yeah, big week for you, Jim, in football. You're obviously cheering against the Patriots. You now got Rex Ryan with another team in your division, with the Bills, and the Jets have a new coach too, and Todd Bowles. So big week for you AFC East people. It
is. I'm cautiously optimistic about the new coach, but that's how I begin with all of them. And they all kind of turn out in that way. So
maybe he'll be the next Weeb Eubank. You have to hope that, right?
There we go. Yeah.
Jim, talk to you tomorrow.
All right, see you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and be sure to join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.